Pachios.
Here for another edition of Pachios on the News, and we have a guest tonight who's been a frequent guest on this program, Senator Angus King. Senator, welcome.
Nice to be here, Harold, always.
So look, let's get right into this
Okay.
beginning. You had a controversial vote.
No kidding.
Yeah. And some are upset, some think you're a smart guy, a rational fellow, and some are just furious. Tell us about this.
Well, I can tell you people are furious. I don't say all people, but I got a lot of angry phone calls that week, I'll tell you that. This was a difficult vote, but I've come to realize there were two aspects of it that really sort of need some discussion. The basis of my vote was we weren't getting anywhere on the health care tax credits. And I've come to realize that I had information that the general public didn't have, and that is my relationship with individual Republican senators. And I would talk to them privately and say, look, is there any chance of getting this done, of doing a deal on the health tax credits, and we'll get this over with? The answer uniformly was not as long as the shutdown is going on. That was their position. No negotiation on health care until the shutdown is over. So then the question was, what good was the shutdown doing if it wasn't going to achieve its goal of getting those health care credits extended? In the meantime, the shutdown was doing a lot of harm. SNAP benefits, 170,000 people in Maine were being hurt by it. People looking for LIHEAP, home heating assistance, that was cut off, small business loans, Head Start, all kinds of programs were in limbo or being cut off during that period of the shutdown. And so what I had to weigh was what appeared to me to be the impossibility of getting what we wanted versus the pain that was being imposed on the people of Maine and the people of the country, and it wasn't going to get better. We could have held out another 2 weeks through Thanksgiving, and I didn't even mention air travel. Imagine what we would have had this past weekend if the air travel had been down 25% and snarled at airports and all those kinds of things. So that was the decision that I had to make. I've come to realize, though, in talking to people, what was really driving that anger. And I think more of it was about people who were angry and disgusted and furious and fearful of Donald Trump. And they saw the shutdown as a way of standing up to Trump. That's what I got a lot of. You caved into Trump. Well, if I was caving into anybody, I would have voted the other way. All the pressure I had was to keep the shutdown going, which I thought was against the interest of Maine people. But I got no pressure from the White House or from Trump or from the Republicans or anybody else. It was a decision to try to do the right thing. But I realized that this became a symbolic issue, standing up to Trump. The problem is that a shutdown to Donald Trump is a gift, not an imposition. He had more power during the shutdown than he would have had otherwise. It gave him and Russell Vought more power to do damage to the federal government, to cut off SNAP and all the other things that they were doing. And I never understood the logic, Harold, of standing up to a bully by giving him another weapon to hit you with. And that's really what we were doing. The shutdown was something they wanted. And so it really wasn't bothering them. People say, well, you gave up your leverage. We didn't have any leverage because leverage implies you have something they want. These guys didn't want the government reopened. So it wasn't an easy decision, but once I really thought it through, and I don't think shutdowns are good policy anyway. How are we going to feel, let's say, if things are reversed in 2 years and the Democrats have control of the Senate and the House, and we want to keep the government open, and the Republicans say, well, we're going to shut down the government until you pass a nationwide abortion ban. We're going to shut down the government until you pass a nationwide voter suppression law. That's not a good way to make policy. We ought to be making policy on the merits, on debates and argument and hearings. It shouldn't be on taking hungry kids hostage, which is essentially what the shutdown amounts to. we did get some good things in the agreement that I helped negotiate. One was, speaking of hungry kids, an extension of SNAP till the end of next year. So even if there's another shutdown, SNAP's off the table. I think that's a positive. And we also got an agreement, which is unheard of. You know how the Senate works, where the Senate Majority Leader, who controls absolutely what comes to the floor of the Senate, agreed to bring up a bill drafted by the Democrats in 2 weeks, that's around December 12th, on the ACA tax credits. And maybe we can work out a bipartisan deal and get it passed. If so, it's a big win. If we can't, then the Republicans will own it. And they'll be the ones who block the extension of the tax credits, causing huge tax premium increases for millions of people, including thousands in Maine.
So you say there will be a vote next week. I'm interested in what you said, that you were able to get an agreement from the majority leader to put the Democratic bill up for a vote. The Republicans will have their own bill. It'll be complex. It'll be about abortion and everything. But the Democratic bill, a clean bill on just this issue, will be voted on?
Correct. And that's
big.
And that's a big deal. And it's sort of inside, how things work.
Right.
But one of the odd things about the Congress is that the majority leader of the U.S. Senate is a dictator when it comes to what comes to the floor for a vote. He or she can decide, I don't like that bill, it's not coming up, even though it's out of committee or whatever. So this was a big concession to get an up or down vote. And as I say, to me, it's a win-win, because either we're going to win the vote and get the tax credits extended, or we're going to put these folks on record saying we don't mind these huge premium increases to our constituents.
You said shutdowns are not a good thing. You worked in the Senate as a staffer in the 70s. I was in Washington in the 60s, Kennedy and Johnson administration. It was inconceivable that the Democrats or even the Republicans would shut down the government. Yeah. Inconceivable. Now it seems to be a common tool. Every couple of years we shut down and we deprive the citizens of the services of their government.
Well, interestingly, I don't think anybody's ever gotten what they wanted from a shutdown. Ted Cruz generated a shutdown when I first got to the Senate over the funding, ironically, for the ACA. Ultimately, it was defeated and it didn't happen. Donald Trump had a long shutdown over funding for the wall. That happened later, but under different circumstances. But shutdowns don't accomplish anything, and they hurt a lot of people. And also, it's just a failure of, what the hell are we there for, is to maintain the operation of the government.
So you're in the Senate, so you're closely following everything. I have an impression, I don't know whether it's right, that the Republicans don't want health care reform. They say they do. They're devoutly repeating how much they want health care. But other than to repeal Obamacare, I don't know what the plan is. Is there a plan?
Not that I know of. Apparently yesterday in the White House they said we have a plan, we're going to, and I laughed. Because they've been saying, Donald Trump's been saying he's had a plan for 10 years and we've never seen it. 2017, the first year after his first inauguration, he talked incessantly about, we have a great plan. Yeah, we're going to have it in we're going to get it in 2 weeks.
We're going to get it in 2 weeks. Yep. But it's not just a plan. It's the best plan ever created for healthcare in the United States.
My position on this vote coming up is, okay, you got a plan, that's fine. Let's pass the 1-year extension, simple, clean, and then we've got a year to talk about your plan.
Yeah.
And to talk about other plans and other issues. Listen, healthcare, we got a real healthcare problem in this country, Harold, although my belief looking at it is we've been arguing about the wrong thing for the last 10 or 15 years. We're arguing about who pays, Medicare, Medicaid, ACA, private pay. We ought to be talking about how much we're paying. We're paying twice as much for health care per person than any other major country in the world, twice as much. It's now up to 22% of GDP. Think of that for a minute. 1 in every $5 spent is on health care in this country. That's unsustainable. And so we really need to be talking more about how do you control the cost of health care, whether it's prescription drugs or utilization or any of those kinds of things. My mission is about prevention. For example, Medicare will pay for your broken hip if you fall down in the shower. They won't pay $10 for a non-skid bath mat so you won't fall down. They won't pay for a grab bar. To me, that just makes no sense. And so I'm looking for, how the cheapest operation is the one that doesn't have to occur. And so I think that's what we've got to be starting to talk about. And then all these other issues of fairness and how the ACA works. But I'll tell you what, we have more people insured health insurance in this country than we've ever had in history. And I think that's a good thing.
Well, what I always found interesting about Obamacare is, first of all, it's Romney Care. Romney did it in Massachusetts.
Right.
And it tracks what we do, and most people understand this, tracks what we do with automobile insurance. We have mandatory automobile insurance because the thought is if everybody doesn't buy it, the pool of premium funds
right.
won't be enough to pay the claims and keep the price low.
That's
so
right.
make everybody have it. So nobody seems to mind buying automobile insurance. And they're mandated to do it.
I'm sure when that law came out, people were talking about an invasion of their rights to privacy.
Probably true. Yeah. But it's the same thing. It's to get everybody to contribute to the pool. So, all right. So we're going to have the vote in a
couple of weeks. I think December 12th is the target date.
So why is health insurance double what it is in other parts of the world?
I think it's a combination of the way our system has evolved and just the way it's oriented toward. Think of it this way: we don't have a healthcare system; we have a sick care system. Our system only operates if you're sick. Your doctor doesn't call you and say, "How are you doing? Are you taking your meds?" You go to see your doctor when there's something wrong with you. So primary care and prevention don't get anywhere near the emphasis that they should. And I think we also pay, I don't know what the number is, but a hell of a lot more for prescription drugs than anybody else in the world. A guy from pharma once stopped me in the airport and said, "Why are you so tough on us?" And I said, "Because it's like this plane today. I feel like I'm the only guy on the plane paying full fare." I mean, you can go to New Brunswick and pay half as much for the same drug as you do here in the United States. And that's, I think that's part of the problem too. Drugs are really an escalating part of the healthcare bill. And they're miraculous. They do a lot of good. But the question is it fair what we're paying?
We don't have just one middleman sucking money out of the system. We have layers of middlemen.
Yep.
People that provide services and grab some of that healthcare money. It's always amazed me how complex it is with insurance companies and
yep.
Consultants and so forth. So let's talk about something even more immediate. Apparently there was a memo that went out from the Secretary of Defense saying that ordering that when you destroy one of those boats coming from Venezuela, if there are any survivors, kill them. Have I oversimplified it?
Well, I think the order was kill everybody. That's what's been reported. I think it's very important to know that the facts are still unclear. What did the Secretary of Defense order, and what were the orders that the people down the line had, and what were their orders? If the reporting is accurate that they killed people who were survivors in the water, that's a stone cold war crime. The law is absolutely clear, whether it's the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the Geneva Convention, the law of war. There's the doctrine of not killing survivors after a battle is over is absolutely clear. So the question here is the facts. what did the Secretary of Defense order? What did the general that ordered the second strike order? And ironically, Harold, this comes at the very time that they're going nuts about these members of Congress making the video saying to the troops, you don't have to follow, in fact, you must not follow an illegal order. And they said, oh, we'll never do an illegal order. There may have been one in this case. And here's what bothers me, and it bothered me from the very beginning. One of the very first acts of this administration back in January, I think, or early February, was to fire all the top legal advisors in the Pentagon, the top JAG officers in the Pentagon. So that's number one, they fired them. Then they illegally fired the Inspector General, which was supposed to be run by Congress. The Inspector General is a really important office all throughout our government that's supposed to look for abuse and breaking of the law, waste of money, those kind of things. They fired that person. And then, in a little-known incident, they transferred 600 JAG officers, military lawyers, out of the Pentagon to be judges in immigration cases. So essentially, they gutted the legal infrastructure within the Pentagon. And if you follow the breadcrumbs, it looks to me like they're warming up to giving some illegal orders because they've taken away the people whose job it is to tell the chain of command, I'm sorry, you can't do that.
So these senators, how many?
I think there were 6, House and Senate.
Yeah, one of them, of course, Mark Kelly, astronaut, Navy captain, I guess.
Jet pilot. Combat missions. Yeah.
So Trump, I think, said he committed treason or something.
Well, these guys don't understand the law, I guess. The United States is exceptional in this sense, that when a military person signs up, takes the oath is to the Constitution, not to the leader, not to a president, not to a political party, not to Congress. It's to the Constitution. And there's no question that all these people were saying was you can't follow illegal orders, and that's black letter law in the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's as if they said the sun rises in the east. All they said was a fact. And the fact that these people have sort of gone nuts and said this was sedition and all that kind of stuff, to me that again is a sort of an indicator that they're thinking in the future about illegal orders. Because remember Trump used the term my generals? Remember that? Yeah. He thinks of the military as he can do what he wants. I mean, he's sending them to American cities, and he's talking about an invasion of Venezuela, which has no authorization whatsoever. And this isn't our country. This isn't the government that we have. In fact, I ran across over the weekend a plaque that's on the wall, a brass plaque at West Point. And the head of it, the heading is loyalty to the Constitution. And in the language of the plaque, it says if a soldier has an order that's contrary to law, if he has an order that's contrary to the law must take precedence over the order. And based upon Nuremberg and a lot of history, saying that you were simply obeying orders is not a defense. And that's what Mark Kelly and those guys were advising these soldiers, that they better be careful because they're not immune by simply saying, well, the general told me to do that. And that's a bedrock principle of our military and our whole legal structure.
So there are Republican senators that you know of, you don't have to identify them, who look at this and look what's happening to Senator Mark Kelly and are appalled and come to his defense?
Not so far, although I will say over the weekend, Roger Wicker, who I know well, who's the Republican chair of the Armed Services Committee, announced...
He's from Mississippi.
He's from Mississippi. We're going to have oversight hearings on this incident in the Caribbean and the second strike on the survivors in the water. And he's a straight up guy. And so the fact that he came out and said that, and I think the House Republican chair said something similar. So I think they're taking this seriously, and I think they're well, I guess taking it seriously is the best way to put it. And we'll see what happens. But we've had some hearings on. By the way, let me talk about what's going on in the Caribbean, not these boats. We now have 6 destroyers, an aircraft carrier, a nuclear submarine, tankers, multiple aircraft, Marines, all stationed in the Caribbean off the coast of Venezuela. Those military assets are not there to interdict speedboats with drugs on them. You don't need an aircraft carrier to stop a speedboat with drugs on it. The only reason to have them there is to either intimidate or threaten or impose some kind of military strike on Venezuela, completely without the authorization of Congress. There's been no submission of we need a declaration of war, or at least an authorization to use of military force. Nothing, and no discussion of why we're doing this. It's again, and I think you asked the right question. The question is, what will the Congress do? Because one of the stories of the past year is Congress's abdication, largely the majority Republicans' abdication of their constitutional role to check the executive.
So, Senator, you've hit upon something that's of personal interest to me. As you know, I worked for Lyndon Johnson, and Democrats brought him down. I remember how absolutely...
And Republicans brought Nixon down.
And Republicans brought Nixon down. And so he didn't want hearings on the Vietnam War. And in 1966 and 67, William Fulbright, who was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, and Johnson's friend. Right. Johnson had been the majority of these were friends of his. Fulbright, Frank Church of Idaho, Wayne Morse of Oregon. They wanted to hold hearings on the Vietnam War, and Johnson knew what that meant. Once they started to hold hearings and blow up, this issue and probe into what the government was doing, the handwriting was on the wall. And Johnson was furious, and he couldn't get them to stop. So I always say, the Democrats, not the Republicans, the Democrats brought Johnson down. And you're right, Republicans brought Nixon down.
Yep.
These guys, your colleagues in the Republican Party, they're afraid to bring this guy down. So he's insulated by these people. I don't understand why. I do understand they want to be reelected, and they're in red states.
Well, you just answered your own question.
Yeah, I did.
I mean, one of the issues, Harold, with our politics today is primaries, and the average turnout for a primary in either party nationwide is something like 21%. That's 1/5 of the party members who vote, and who is that 21% likely to be? The most activist, the most passionate. On the Democratic side, the most progressive. On the Republican side, the most MAGA. So even though these people, for example, on the healthcare tax credits, thousands of their constituents are going to be hurt, but they aren't necessarily the people that vote in their primaries. And Donald Trump still holds enormous sway over Republican primaries. And you can Jeff Flake, Bob Corker, I don't know, I'm not sure about Romney's decision, but it may have had something to not wanting to face a primary. There's a whole group of Republicans who are not here anymore because he took them out. So it's not an idle threat on his part.
Well, I think the extremists among the Democrats have learned that lesson, and they think they're going to do the same thing. They talk about primarying people, too, that are not left enough.
The interesting thing was during this whole thing about the shutdown, a lot of people wrote and said, we're going to primary him. Well, I'm an independent. There's no primary.
But some people did say they were going to.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But so, that's one of the luxuries of being an independent is that I can just call them as I see them.
It's true. Back to Venezuela and the aircraft carrier destroyers and so forth. Tell us, if you can, or speculate, what's going on here. The MAGAs have a strong isolationist trend, and this is opposite. This is adventurism. I thought MAGAs were against this kind of thing.
And I think a lot of them are.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the things that's straining Donald Trump's coalition because he has talked about America first.
Yeah.
And it's very it's hard to know what's going on. What the Venezuela thing. One set of speculation is that it's a distraction. That it's a distraction from Epstein or from whatever else. That there's a history. Margaret Thatcher's, let's just look this up. Margaret Thatcher's approval ratings the day before the Falklands War, remember the Falklands War? Yep. Were in the 30s or low 40s, and they were over 60, close to 70 the week after the Falklands War. Yep. Ronald Reagan invaded Grenada 2 or 3 weeks after the Marines barracks was blown up in Beirut, Lebanon. A nice little war is one way to rally people, and this one, I mean, Maduro's a bad guy. The drugs they're sending are harmful to America, no question. But if you apply that, there are a lot of bad guys out there. There are a lot of bad dictators in the world. Are we going to invade all those countries and flip their political system? It's hard to understand what the motivation is.
What I think of when I think of, they want to intercept the drugs, as long as there is a market in the United States for drugs, as long as there is a demand, drugs are going to meet that demand. I don't care what happens to Venezuela.
Sadly.
You could evaporate Venezuela. You're still going to have a big drug problem in the United States.
Sadly, that's accurate. But here's the other thing about this that really got my attention over the weekend. So we're blowing up these boats. We've killed like 80 people. They're not drug kingpins. They're not who's driving those boats. They're they're low. If they're cartel members at all, they're very low level. But over the weekend, Donald Trump pardoned the president of Honduras, who was tried and found guilty in an American court of being a huge part of a drug conspiracy that shipped, I think the estimate I saw was 500 tons of cocaine into this country. So here's the kingpin, or I shouldn't use that term, but he was the president of the country, and the evidence in the court was found guilty of participating in the drug trade, and Donald Trump just pardoned him. You know why? He said because he's a president and he was treated unfairly.
Yeah.
I mean,
so it's all about Donald Trump.
Yeah, we're shooting down, we're killing these guys in the Caribbean. And by the way, I've been harping for years on our failure to interdict enough drugs in the Caribbean, but not through shooting them and killing them, but by interdicting them and arresting them and trying them, and then you can also get to one way you get to the upper levels is by, as you know this as a lawyer, by going after the lower levels and getting them to tell you who's in charge. When you kill them, you lose that. And so I've been pounding the table in armed services hearings because we weren't interdicting enough. And so I'm not pro-drug trade at all. But the question is, do you do it legally, and is it being done in a way that's actually going to impair, as you say, the drugs that are coming into America?
The Fight Club. I read in the newspaper the other day about a group of 3 or 4 Democratic senators who are after the minority leader because he's not tough enough, and
You mean Republican senators?
no,
Demo-
no, Democrats, and our
Chuck
Senator
Schumer, you
Warren, Senator Warren. They're mad at the majority leader because he's not he's not backing more extreme, not backing the people that Bernie Sanders is backing for public office. For Senate. They're saying that the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee is trying to help people like Governor Mills instead of Plattner, and they call themselves, I think, the Fight Club. That was reported in the New York Times.
Yeah.
And Merkel is one of them. You've not heard of that, but that's good. That's a good sign.
I have not, and I'm not privy to those discussions since I'm not a member of the Democratic Party. But
here's what the headline says.
My sense is Schumer faces the Fight Club of liberal peers. My sense is that Chuck Schumer's goal is a Democratic Senate. He's not.
Nothing else could be in his mind.
Right. That's right. And he's not. He's trying to help recruit the candidates that he thinks will win. And sometimes it may be a more progressive candidate, and other times it might not be. It depends on the state and the politics of that state. But I think. Well, I'm not going to comment. Those are my friends.
Those are your friends, not your party, but your friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you think that that things will change, or likely to change, if Donald Trump is seen to be less popular in the next 6 months or a year?
Yeah, I do. I think. And you're seeing a little bit of that now as his popularity goes below 40% into the 30s. Then I think some of the Republicans are less afraid of him, and they start to view him as a liability. Remember, they've not only got to worry about the primary, they got to worry about the general election, and they're seeing, the results in Virginia and New Jersey. I think were a real wake-up call to them, because you had two interestingly moderate Democrats, Abigail Spanberger and Mikey and Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, who won by much bigger margins than anybody expected.
Right.
And so, I think that's an important indicator that the Republicans not only have to worry about primaries, but they have to worry about the general election, because if things keep going the way they're going to get wiped out next year.
I once talked to Bill Cohen 4 or 5 years ago, and actually the campaign in 2020 when Trump was running for re-election. And I had interviewed him previously, and he had said terrible things very critical about Trump. And after we finished the interview, I said to him, Bill, what about all the guys, the Republican senators that you served with in the 70s and 80s? What do they think? They agree with me. So, do you know for a fact that you talk to Republican senators all the time, who they will privately concede to you that?
That's a good question, Harold, but I'm not going to answer.
Okay.
There's another factor, though, that's entered into our politics that is at play here, and that is physical danger. Death threats. Death threats to members of Congress have increased dramatically in the last 10 years. And we've seen the legislators out in Minnesota that were killed, Charlie Kirk. Violence has become part of our public life, political violence, and that's really bad. So when you're making these kinds of decisions, Jared Golden, I think he cited that as part of his reason for leaving Congress was danger to his family, and boy, that's a terrible place for us to be, and that's why when Donald Trump says something like, he threatens, he posts something about this, the people saying you shouldn't follow illegal orders. He says, sedition punishable by death. That's really dangerous, Harold, because there are unbalanced people out there who are going to take that as an instruction, or at least as a permission. And you and I learned that a long time ago. You have to be careful if you're in a leadership position how you use language, and what people are going to take from that. And so making those kinds of statements by the President of the United States about punishable by death, that's an invitation to political violence, and it's no joke because it's happening.
I would see how you react to this. I see things like that, what Trump said, and other outrageous things that Trump has done are not viewed as outrageous by his followers. They love it. They love it.
Well, that's one of his. They say he says it like it is. He says it like it is.
So it's them. I mean, we're going to have more Trumps if we continue to have the number of people who love these outrageous statements by Trump.
Well, Harold, the constitutional provision, the constitutional structure is all about separation of powers and checks and balances. And that's what we've really lost sight of in the last year. I made a series of speeches about the Constitution early in the Trump administration, talking about the danger that the framers were worried about more than anything else was the concentration of power in one set of hands. Madison said in the 47th Federalist, the legislative, executive, and judiciary power in one set of hands is the perfect definition of tyranny. He didn't mince words. He used the word tyranny. And later on, he said about legislative and executive power in one set of hands inevitably leads to abuse. They understood human nature. And the great disaster, or the terrible thing that's happened in this year, is the undermining of that fundamental structure between the Congress and the Supreme Court, which has been supine, is a polite word. We're creating a supreme executive, which is exactly what the framers feared, and here we are, and it's really worrisome. And I understand my Republican friends' concern about primaries and even death threats and things, but at some point, the oath we take is to the Constitution. And right now, the Constitution is under the most direct assault since the Civil War. And
why can't Congress assert itself? Is fear because Republican members of Congress fear Donald Trump?
Yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell. I don't think there's much doubt about it. I mean, there's some of them that are, ideologically with him, and they think that they don't like government, and they think firing everybody is a good idea. But by and large, I think that's it, and it's a real test. And here, look back at our history. One of the key moments in the impeachment of Richard Nixon was the 6 Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee, one of whom was Bill Cohen, who voted for impeachment, the articles of impeachment. That was a turning point, and it was a very important moment in the history of this country. The question now is, are there 6 more in various committees or wherever who will step up and do this? And as you say, it's not only one-sided. It was the Democrats in Lyndon Johnson's time who stood up against a policy that he was passionate about, that they believed wasn't in the best interest of the American people. That's not easy to do, but there are times...
It was probably easier then.
I think it was. But there are times when what the hell are you in the job for? I mean, that's what strikes me. What are you going to tell your grandchildren?
That leads me to another question. When you were a Senate staffer in the 70s, and when I worked in Washington in the 60s, Congress would pass appropriation bills. And sometimes it was, the last day of December, and usually, and
but they passed them.
But they passed them
Sure.
always. They didn't shut down the government. Not continuing resolutions weren't the solution. Why can't we have a Republican Senate, a Republican House, a Republican president? Why can't they run a government and pass appropriation bills?
By the way, they didn't do it when Joe Biden was president and the Democrats were in control either.
No,
there were
they didn't.
appropriations bills passed that year. So,
Good point.
so this is a fundamental failure. And frankly, this is a mystery to me. I've been there 12 years.
You're a United States Senator.
I know, but I can't figure out why they don't pass appropriation bills. The committee reports out these bills this year. We're going to be, hopefully, we passed 3 as part of the shutdown deal, 3 of the 12, so they're done. There are 3 or 4 more that we're going to try to pass in the next 3 weeks that will fund 85% of the government. So that's a good thing. But why now? Why not? What do we know now that we didn't know last August? And that I never have understood that, except part of it, I think, is the leadership wants to have control over that process, and so that's sort of slowed it down. But it's a fundamental failure of the Congress to not just do an orderly thing. I'll tell you a funny story. When I was governor, at one point we had a budget impasse, and some of the leaders of I think it was, pretty sure it was the Democrats, came to me and said, "Governor, we're close to a deal. The deadline is next Tuesday. Why don't we do a continuing resolution like they do in Washington for a couple of weeks, and then we can get this resolved?" You know what I said? Not on your life.
Yeah.
Once you go down that road, a continuing resolution, which simply is a punt,
will always be the solution.
It's too easy. Of course. Well, we're living it.
Yeah.
We're living it.
So I don't know how
I'm not on the Appropriations Committee, so it's easy for me to throw stones. But they ought to. There's no excuse for not doing it.
No, I don't know why the chairman of those committees and our chairman of appropriations doesn't say, we're going to do it what we're supposed to do.
Well, part of our agreement with Mr. Thune, with Majority Leader Thune, in ending the shutdown, was that it was the intention, and we'll see how it works, to bring up 4 more major appropriation bills: defense, what they call Labor H, which is labor and health and human services, I think commerce, and I can't remember the 4th. But if we can get those done, then that constitutes 85% of the federal expenditure, and so that's on the docket for the next 3 weeks. We'll see.
We'll see. You've been governor, you 2 terms in the U.S. Senate. Why do we have this rural? Historically, there's always been a rural-urban split politically in this country. Sometimes the populace in the rural areas have been Democrats. Mm-hmm. Williams Jennings Bryan.
Well, when I came to the Senate 12 years ago, there were Democratic senators from North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Indiana, Florida.
Just 12 years ago.
Yeah, just 12 years ago, they're all gone. Now those states are totally Republican.
Do you think it's just temporary? This history is kind of a revolving door. It goes one way, it goes another way. Do you think that nothing's ever permanent? You think a Democrat could win in those areas and a Republican could win in city?
Yeah, I do think it's possible, and whether or not it's going to happen anytime soon, I don't know. I think the Democrats have had a hard time talking to rural voters. If you look at the map of Trump's election this past time, you see vast swaths of red. Now, they're rural areas with fewer people. Trump carried, 10,000 counties, and Biden carried 2,000, but counties don't vote. The population was pretty close to an even split. But I do think there has to be a deeper understanding of of the problems in rural America. Maine, I've been thinking about the 2nd District and working on issues with the paper industry and agriculture and potatoes and everything else ever since I was governor. But it's tough. Here's the other problem, Harold. And this has occurred in the past 30 years. It used to be that everybody in America got their facts from one person. Who was it? You tell me.
Walter Cronkite.
Walter Cronkite. Yeah. That's the answer. Now we have Fox News talking to Republicans and conservatives. We have MS Now, I guess it's called, MSNBC talking to progressives and liberals. The internet divides us into what we already want. A friend of mine said recently, a brilliant insight, I thought. She said, people are now looking for affirmation, not information. They're going to the media sites, whether it's online or on TV, that they already agree with. The result is we have people walking around this country that are in 2 different factual universes. And my experience in public policy is if you have an understanding of the facts, a common understanding, if you get 10 people around the table and hear the facts, whether it's healthcare or whatever, you can generally come to some agreement. If you don't have agreement on the facts, it's impossible to get to a policy, and that's where we are. One of the most insightful comments, I was at a forum just before the 2016 election, and there was a reporter there who had followed both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump for the year, and I'll never forget it, he said, I realized after traveling with these 2 candidates, they were running for president of 2 different countries. Isn't that fascinating?
That's terrific. That's right on.
That is and that's where we are, where people get their information. And part of this is education, Harold. We have to teach people to be better consumers of information, to get both sides.
Be more discerning.
Be more discerning. And we've got to teach kids to be digitally literate, to know when they're being fooled, to know when they're being conned, to question if that doesn't sound true. Maybe there's another way to check it or something. Because right now, one of the really difficult problems of solving public policy is a lack of agreement in the Congress, but the Congress reflects the public, and the public is split on, what are the basic facts of immigration, for example. All the studies, for example, by the FBI and everybody else, undocumented immigrants commit crimes at half the rate of regular old Americans.
Right.
But if you listen to Donald Trump, they're murderers.
They're
and
all
rapists
murderers and rapists,
yeah,
all of them.
Yeah, but you see, that's a factual issue that we don't have agreement on.
Yeah. Back to this split in America. White men, rural people seem to be on one side, and there are various theories. One of the theories that kind of makes sense to me is that they think the Democrats are worried about people want to provide services to people, want government to help people, but they think the Democrats want to help them less than they want to help other minorities. And so the DEI thing is, these are the people we're going to focus. We're not so concerned about you because you're a white person. And that's what they're seeing.
Sure. Well, one of the best analogies I've heard is, imagine you're waiting in line for a movie, and there's a long line out in front of the movie, and you're standing there and you're sort of taping back and forth, and then you look up and a couple of people are cutting in line in front of you. You're mad as hell when that happens. And I think that's what people perceive. I don't think it's true, but they perceive that they're being pushed aside in some way. And Harold, we're living through one of the greatest changes in human history, and we don't realize it because we're in the middle of it. The empowerment of women and minorities is a world historic change. Women couldn't even vote in this country till 100 years ago. And now, they're in the U.S. Senate and they're on the Supreme Court and they're active in business and in leadership positions. Historically, people don't give up power voluntarily. And I think a lot of white men feel that they're losing power. And this is a good thing. I mean, the history of our Constitution is that at the time it was adopted, only white male property owners could vote.
Yeah.
And periodically throughout our history, we've expanded that circle to include minorities, to include women. Black people got the right to vote in this country before women. I mean, but as that circle expands, the people who have traditionally held power feel threatened, and it's a huge change, and it's a change for the better. But I think the sort of deep, as you mentioned, the deep sort of psychological anger, feeling that that they're being not respected, not listened to, and pushed aside is a factor in this in our politics today.
You've gone back to the people, you've discussed a little bit the people who wrote our Constitution, the so-called Founding Fathers. I want to talk about that for a second. We've got a few minutes left. I have a theory, because I'm almost 90 years old, so you can develop theories over.
You're not that old. The pyramids are older than you.
Yeah.
Eiffel Tower's older than you. Go ahead. Sorry.
So I have probably when I reached my 80s concluded that everything evolves in the world. Everything, including education, science, everything evolves, except one thing is always the same: human nature.
Yeah.
So that the human nature that the Founding Fathers encountered is no different than what we encounter today.
Absolutely.
Or what people encountered 5,000 years ago.
That's right.
It's static. And so the Founding Fathers wrote that the leaders, they thought the leaders, political leaders, had to be a little bit better, had to be not so captive to the base human instincts.
Sure.
They had to be leaders. And so they talked about virtue, and it depended on virtuous leaders.
Yeah, and they assumed that.
And they assumed that.
And the first leader was George Washington, who met that criteria.
Correct.
But if you go, I think it's the 51st Federalist. Madison has this wonderful provision where he says, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. If men were governed by angels, no checks and balances would be necessary. The problem lies in this. In a government of men over men, you must empower the government to control the governed, and you must also control the government itself.
Correct.
That's
beautiful.
And that's human nature. And one of the problems we have, Harold, is history. We don't. A lot of people don't. History is not a major topic. It's not taught. Civics isn't taught in our schools much anymore. And I ran across a quote from Cicero, the famous Roman. He said, if you don't know history, you live your entire life as a child, which is a really interesting insight. It means you don't know anything that happened for the last 1,000 years.
Exactly. Exactly.
And as Mark Twain said, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it usually rhymes. And we're living through things that have occurred before, and we need to take it seriously.
One last question, has nothing to do with what we've been talking about, but it's always been in my mind. You're on the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Correct.
So
that's all I'll tell you.
We have this debate still ongoing, very strong debate, that they didn't find Russian interference. No, there was no Russian interference in the 2016 election. I thought it was the difference. There was no collusion. Correct. But there was a lot of interference.
There was no question. I served on the Intelligence Committee throughout our 4-year investigation, where the committee was controlled by Republicans. Our conclusion was absolutely the Russians were deeply involved in the 2016 election. And on the collusion question, I'll just leave you with one fact. On August 2nd, 2016, at 9 o'clock in the evening in New York City, Paul Manafort, then Donald Trump's campaign manager, had dinner with Konstantin Kilimnik, an agent of Russian intelligence, and gave him Donald Trump's internal polling data. I rest my case.
Yeah, but that's a fact. That's a fact. I know it's a fact. And it's a fact found by your
By the-
Senate
by
Intelligence
our
Committee with
committee.
Republicans leading it.
Absolutely.
Republicans found that fact.
Oh, absolutely.
But you can't find many devotees of Donald Trump today who would accept that fact. They would say, no, that never happened.
Well,
It's unbelievable.
but there, I mean, as you say, if you can debate about collusion, only I think that example is pretty clear that there was some cooperation or communication, but there's no question whatsoever that the Russians were deeply, deeply engaged in that election. The intelligence seemed to be, they started out anti-Hillary. Putin blamed Hillary for the so-called Rainbow Revolution, or whatever it was, color revolution in Russia, that was an abortive attempt to change the government. So they hated her. And then later on in the campaign, they realized Donald Trump had a shot, and they started helping him. But they started out with the intent to hurt Hillary. But there's no question they were deeply engaged on all kinds of levels, whether it was penetration of voting systems. Now, they didn't change any votes. Interestingly, they penetrated something like 42 states' election systems, but they didn't do anything. But what they did do was a lot of disinformation, splitting people, misinformation, and of course the hacking of the Democratic National Committee emails and then selectively leaking them during the course of the campaign was a very deliberate strategy on which they spent millions of dollars.
Hasn't ended, has it?
No, oh no. This is something the Russians have done since the earliest part of the communist takeover in the 20s. The Comintern. They've been trying to mess around with democracies. They're doing it right now. Here's an interesting. I'll end with this. I met a few years ago with a group of people from, I'm pretty sure it was Estonia, which is right on the Russian border. And Russia's constantly...
We got 60 seconds.
All right, Russia's constantly bombarding them with propaganda and disinformation. I said, how do you prevent this? You know what they said? Because we know it's the Russians. And that's where our government has to share information. Yeah. We have to share the reality of what's going on.
Senator, this has, as usual, been delightful, informative, and I think for our audience, very informative to kind of get the straight scoop, because as you point out, people are not paying too much attention to the facts, or enough attention to the facts.